Okay, in this video, what I wanted to go over is some keyboard shortcuts. I'm not going to try to teach you every keyboard shortcut that exists in Max, but there are some that we use all the time. Okay, and Max is pretty good about you trying to use the first letter of something as the speed key. As an example here in our viewport, we have by default you have a grid on in here. So G is the viewport that turns the grid on and off. Okay, so they try to make it pretty simple. Okay. Another thing is we need to put a material on our object all the time. So we have to bring out the material editor. That's M on the keyboard, brings up the material editor. I'll explain the material editor in a different video, but M to bring up the material editor. Okay, now the real basic ones, okay? F3 turns the viewport shading on and off. So I'm going to turn the grid off so it's easier to kind of see this. So F3 turns the shaded viewport on and off. Okay. While it's shaded, F4 turns the wireframe back on. Okay. So F3 turns the shaded viewport on and off. And while it's shaded, F4 turns the wireframe on and off. On and off, on and off, on and off. Okay, so a lot of times we're wanting to just see the wireframe. Okay. Like here. Okay. A lot of times we want to see the shaded with the wireframe on, and sometimes we want to see the shaded with the wireframe off. Now, also, when we pick things, they become white. That's why you should never choose white as your wireframe color. Now, when we have something picked, we have a little box over here. We can click and we can change to whatever color we want the wireframe to be. But you should stay away from certain colors. For example, we don't want white. Why don't we want white? Okay, because when we pick things, the wire turns white. So if it's already white and when I pick it, I can't see a change. So we don't really want to use white. Okay. Another thing we don't want to use is gray. And the reason you don't want to use gray is because we have this thing called freezing something. So I can freeze an object so I can't actually move it and it turns gray. So when I have a gray wireframe, it makes it seem like it's frozen. Okay. So I would stay away from gray as well. Another one you want to stay away from is red, because red is our sub-object selection. So when I pick something, it turns white, but I go in and I sub-op select things, it turns red. So it throws us off. Let me go back to my box selection. If the object already wireframe is red. So I would stay away from white, gray, and red as your colors. Now by default in here, it comes in and gives you random colors. I don't really like that. I like my wireframe to have a professional look. So I turn this off and my wireframe is black. Okay. Now the only drawback to that is when you first make an object, which I'll, let's just, we'll hide this one and I'll make another plane and you'll see when I make it, it's black, because by default in Max, when you make an object, it makes, since it doesn't have a shader on it yet, it makes it the color of the wireframe. So, but your method should always be putting a shader on it anyway. So, I mean, you create it like this, then you hit M, bring out the material editor, you make a shader, you put it on there, and now it'll be the color of the wireframe, with that, shader on it. Okay. So I'm going to unhide this one again. Go back to where we were. Okay, so the other thing is a lot of times we're needing to use a snap. Okay, so you have different kinds of snaps up here. Okay, but the default to turn a snap on and off is S on the keyboard. And a lot of times we're needing to do it in the middle of doing something. So if I come in here, I'm going to hit 1 on the keyboard. to turn on my vertices. And then I want to move the vertices, and I might want to snap it. So I hit S on the keyboard. So when I move it, I can snap it to another place. Okay. Obviously Control Z is undo. And then now you can also, the snap settings, you right click on it to get to the snap settings on these. And by the way, on the, Max interface, when you look at these tools up here at the top, anytime you see this little arrow in here, if you click and hold down, it's got to fly out with more things inside of it. Okay. All right, I'm going to turn that off. Okay, so Alt-N is another one we use all the time, okay? And what this allows us is to subdivide our object. And let me go in here and turn off our isoline so you can see this. So Alt-N turns the subdivision off, and Alt-N turns it on, okay? So we have a subdivision that's built into the base polygon, okay? And Alt-N is what turns this button right here on and off, okay? And so when you do that, also this little thing will come up. So instead of having to go over here to set the subdivisions you want, okay, just when you're in here, you pick it Alt-N, and then it will actually set you up to do your subdivisions, okay? And you can turn it on and off and on and on and off, okay? So that's a good one to know too. Now, Alt-W is what makes this window big or small. Okay, Alt-W. Okay, by the way, all your viewport keys are down here in the bottom right-hand corner, which are where all the viewport. So you can see this bottom right-hand button, that's the button to actually do that, and the speed key is Alt-W. And we use that quite a bit because sometimes we want to look at different views, okay? Now, a lot of times we're just wanting to switch from one view to another, okay? Well, that's V on the keyboard will bring up a little menu, and then you can switch to what view you want to see. Okay. Okay, another thing that pops up periodically is bounding box. So I'm going to make a sphere so you can see this here. So I have a sphere. Okay. And sometimes when you pull up a sphere, it'll have a little box around it like this. Okay. That's called a bounding box. And what that is the smallest box that an object can fit in. Okay. The speed key is J on the keyboard to turn that on and off. So a lot of times if it's on, we really don't want to see that. We just want to see the geometry we're making. So J will turn that off. Okay. Okay, and let's put a material on that. So M on the keyboard, put a material on that. All right, I'm going to show you one other little thing here. By default, a 3D environment has default lights placed in here, so we can't see them, but there's actually lights placed out here. There's one at the top left and one at the bottom right. We can't get to them. We can't manipulate them, but we wouldn't be able to see anything if we didn't have those, okay? So when I get over to my create menu and I go to lights, and I'm just going to use a standard light, an Omni right now for this demonstration. And I click out here in the viewport, then I'm placing a light, which is going to light the screen. And then it turns off all those other lights. Okay. Now, okay. So now if I'm moving the light around and I don't want my snap on, I'm not seeing a lot of interactivity in here, okay? So right up here on where this control is, where it says performance up here, if I turn this to high quality, okay, and I'm going to need to switch to a top view where I can kind of see where this light is. Okay, I need it in here. Let's go ahead and just put this in the center. Now this is the front, so this is where I'm going to be standing. And so now you'll see this interacting with the light. Okay, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key and make a copy of this. And so I've got another light over here. Okay. And so these lights are interactive with the scene. So there's a lot of times where we put some lights in there because we want to do a render and see how things look. But then when we're modeling, we don't want to see those lights. Okay. So if you do Control L, that will turn these lights off. Okay. So now these lights are no longer functioning. You're using the default lights. Okay. So if I hit Control L again, then I'm switching it back and now these lights are active in here. So there are times where we want these lights to be active and there's other times where we want to kind of like turn these off. Well, if I come in here and I actually pick a light and I turn it off and I pick this one and I turn it off, I'm turning all the lights off and I can't see anything. Okay. If I hit Control L, it will turn the default lights back on so I can see them. Okay. So the speed key there is Control L to go back to your default lights when you're modeling. And then the same thing to turn it back off. Control L will turn it back off. And now I can see these lights. Of course, I have to turn these on. By the way, it throws people off because, especially anybody who's ever used Maya, because over here we have an outliner which shows the visibility of something. So if I turn this eye off, that light is going to turn off. Okay. And that's going to turn off, but it's only turning its visibility off. It doesn't turn the light off. The light's still active. It's just we're hiding it in the viewport, which is a little bit different than in Maya, because in Maya, when you hide a light, it turns its function off. Okay. Max is a little more sophisticated, which allows you to hide the light if we don't want to see the light, but the light is still active and lights our scene. Okay, let's see if I can think of anything else. I think those are the main things on speed keys. Now, we'll cover one more thing while we're doing this, which is just saving. And people have a tendency to just do Control S to save all the time, and they're just overwriting their file, the same file all the time. And that's kind of dangerous to do, because if the file gets corrupted, then you've lost everything. In Max, you can do Save As, and then there's a little plus button. We can look down here at the bottom. There's a plus button right here, which will take whatever name that you give it, and then it's going to number it in sequences. So it'll put a 01 on it. Then the next time I hit the plus, it's a 02. Next time a 03. And then you're saving your files in sequence, which is a better method. That way, if something messes up, I have one that I can go back to. Okay, so those are some speed keys that we use all the time. So hopefully that will help you out. All right, thank you very much.